Democrats outnumber Republicans overall in terms of voter registration in Pennsylvania, but in the month of July, new voter registration for Republicans outpaced Democrats 4 times, with 21,000 new voters registering as Republicans, with just 5,000 new voters registering as Democrats. And this trend could potentially carry on into November, narrowing the gap, which is about 356,000 between Democrats and Republicans in Pennsylvania. So we're going to talk about what the implications are for this voter registration gain that the GOP is having, whether or not it will have any impact on Pennsylvania in 2024, and ultimately how important the state of Pennsylvania is for either party to win the White House. So we're going to get to all of that in just a second, but first, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. So Pennsylvania is quite literally the keystone state when it comes to the 2024 election, because this scenario is a very realistic scenario, at least based on the polling. Donald Trump winning the Sunbelt states of Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and Kamala Harris winning Wisconsin, Michigan, leaving just Pennsylvania as sort of the toss-up state. Now, if Donald Trump were to pick off Pennsylvania in this scenario, that would put him at 287 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 251. Kamala would win Pennsylvania, it would put her at 270, Donald Trump at 268. Now, Pennsylvania being 19 electoral college votes is actually the largest prize of the various toss-up states in November. So if Pennsylvania were to go, let's say, Republican, Democrats could win Nevada and Arizona and still would ultimately lose the election. So that's how important Pennsylvania is for either party. It basically cancels out Nevada, Arizona, or Nevada and Wisconsin, or a combination of those states. So because it's such a large prize, tens of millions of dollars has been pumped into the state, and tens of millions of more dollars are going to be pumped into the state from now until November. So that's why we're paying so much attention to this state, and that's why I think the voter registration gains for Republicans isn't exactly totally insignificant. Now, this, of course, is the map of voter registration by county in the state, and you'll notice it's very similar to the typical partisan geographic breakdown we have in normal Pennsylvania elections. Most of the counties that are blue on this map typically vote blue in federal and statewide elections. Now, there are some notable exceptions. Bucks County, for example, in the Philadelphia area is typically blue when it comes to presidential and statewide elections, but Republicans recently in the past month have actually outpaced Democrats, making up 41.4% of registered voters there compared to Democrats' 41.3%. Now, that seems very insignificant, but this was a county that previously had a Democratic plurality. And if we take a look at the 2016 and 2020 maps, Bucks County comes down to the wire, with Democrats only winning it by a couple of points. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won here by just 0.8%, and in 2020, Joe Biden won here by over 4%. So this county typically is very close and sometimes is described as a bellwether county. So the fact that Republicans now have a plurality here, I don't think is completely insignificant, but we have to understand that voters don't always vote for the party they're registered as. And a perfect example of this is the 2019 party registration map for Democrats and Republicans in the state, because you'll notice in the Southwest, these counties around Pittsburgh are very red and were very red even in 2016, Donald Trump winning some of these counties by over 30 points. Democrats still held, in some cases, like in Beaver, for example, the majority of registered voters in these counties. Now, since then, over the past 5 years, there's been a pretty big trend away from Democrats. Beaver County now has a 1.7% party registration advantage for Republicans. Fayette County has an 8-point party registration advantage for Republicans, and Washington has a 10-point advantage for Republicans. And again, these are counties that in 2016, Democrats either had a majority or plurality of registered voters. So this is a prime example of the fact that voters don't always vote for the party they're registered as. There's tons of rural Democrats in Pennsylvania that still are registered Democrats that vote for Republicans, and vice versa. And the inverse of that is really in the Philadelphia collar counties. Chester County, for example, only has a Democrat party registration advantage of around 2 points, despite the fact that in 2016 and 2020, the county voted for Democrats by nearly double digits in 2016 and by over 17 points in 2020. So there's examples of this on both sides of the aisle, but this just goes to show you that party registration in Pennsylvania isn't always binding, as it isn't in other parts of the country. But it does show the trade-off of voter coalitions in the state. Republicans really winning the former white working class union voters that were always Democrats. Now they're Republican. These are trends that have been going on in the state for decades now, but the voter registration gains sort of lag behind the actual political trends because the Philadelphia area has been blue since 1992 when it comes to federal elections for the most part, and southwestern PA has been red for the most part since 2004-2008. You had a large amount of time where Democrats or the opposite party was the dominant force in terms of voter registration, and it sort of lagged behind those political trends. So as for 2024, it could indicate some enthusiasm for Republicans, at least as far as Bucks County is concerned. But Bucks County has always come down to the wire, as I mentioned. And in some down ballot races, it tends to vote a little bit more Republican when it comes to state treasurer, for example. Bucks County actually voted Republican on the same ballot where Donald Trump lost the county by over 4 points. So there is some split ticket voting going on. Luzerne County, I think, is a very interesting case study because this county in 2016 and in 2020 delivered Donald Trump a double-digit margin of victory, despite the fact that registered Democrats still make up a plurality of the voter base here. 0.5%, so a very small advantage for Democrats, and honestly, that could flip foreseeably before November. So there are voter registration gains going on in both parties, but Republicans are slightly ahead of Democrats on this front. Now, Democrats, I believe in 2008 had 4 million registered voters in Pennsylvania. Now they only have 3.9. So while there have been some periods where Democratic voter registration was outpacing Republicans, especially when it came to the southeastern portion of the state, Republicans have basically been decimating Democrats in basically every other part of the state. I mean, if we take a look at the 2019 map, a lot of these counties that are blue on this map, Cambria County, for example, Fayette County, Greene County. These counties haven't voted for Democrats statewide or in federal elections for over a decade, and yet Democrats still made up the plurality of the voting base. And in places like Northampton County, Democrats made up the majority despite the fact that Donald Trump won here almost 4 points in 2016. And of course today, Northampton County still gives Democrats a 5.6% advantage. Lehigh County, another important county in eastern Pennsylvania, gives Democrats a 10-point voter registration advantage. So we'll probably take a look at this map as we get closer to the election because there's going to be shifts. I think Luzerne County is probably going to flip red. I think some of these redder counties in southwestern PA are going to continue to trend more in the Republicans' direction. I mean, Westmoreland County, Republicans typically crack 60%, at least Donald Trump does, and registered Republicans is only at 50%, registered Democrats is at 36%. So I think you're going to see some movement there. And in places like Lancaster County, you might see movement in the opposite direction, Democrats making registration gains there because this is a county that's been trending left over the past couple of presidential cycles. So overall, these switches, I think, don't mean a whole lot. They're just sort of an aftershadow of the political trends we've seen in Pennsylvania over the past couple of decades. If we take a look at the RCP average right now, there is a dead heat between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Trump is at 48%, Kamala is at 48%. So this really is anyone's race. And as we said earlier, this state could make all of the difference because so far Kamala Harris is polling better than Donald Trump in Wisconsin and Michigan. So it wouldn't be surprising if she were to win both of these states. And honestly, Donald Trump really only needs Pennsylvania if he wins Georgia and North Carolina. He can lose Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan and still win the election with Pennsylvania. But if he loses Pennsylvania, he has to win Nevada, Arizona, and Wisconsin in order to become president again. So the path becomes very difficult for both parties without Pennsylvania. And this was sort of the case in 2020 as well, although the Electoral College was a little bit different. Texas and Florida had less electoral votes, so you don't exactly get the same combination. But by and large, Pennsylvania is always seen as pretty important, at least since 2016, for either party's path to victory. And so far, the polling is showing us that the state is going to be incredibly close. Again, in 2020, Joe Biden only won here by 1.6%. And in 2016, Donald Trump only won here by 0.7%. So this state has always been extremely competitive over the past two cycles. In both cycles, Pennsylvania voted to the right of the nation as a whole. And so far, when we look at the popular vote, Kamala Harris is only up by 1%, which means if that were the result on Election Day, Donald Trump would probably win because conventional wisdom says that Democrats need to win the popular vote by over 4 points in order to translate to an electoral college win. So with Kamala Harris only up by 1 point, it's very likely that she would lose Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. and ultimately lose the presidency. So that would give you a 312 electoral college win for Republicans, 226 for Democrats. So Democrats need to drive up the popular vote. Now, the popular vote is something we're going to talk about in another video because I think you're going to see some very interesting shifts in 2024 there. Republicans gaining in some unlikely places, and also Democrats probably gaining in some unlikely places. So, of course, that'll probably come out later this week. But registration gains do show, I think, some enthusiasm. Republicans are putting a lot of effort in Pennsylvania, especially because it is so important to the path to victory. And Democrats are pouring a lot of money in here too. So I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the day, Pennsylvania, like it was, I believe, in 2004, is the state where the most money and the most attention goes. Because, again, Republicans could lose Nevada, Arizona, and Wisconsin, and Michigan, and still win the presidency if they win Pennsylvania. So again, that's 4 out of the 7 battleground states. So Republicans can lose most of the battleground states, and as long as they win Pennsylvania, still win the election. So that's why you're going to see a lot of attention paid here. And we're probably going to talk about Pennsylvania a lot from now until November. So anyway, that's it for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you miss any more videos I put out. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.